You've been carrying something for a long time. Not in your hands. Not somewhere you can sit down and walk away from. Somewhere deeper than that. The quiet belief that something is wrong with you. You know it's there. You've tried to reason past it. And it came back. It's not always the loudest thought in the room. Some days, it's almost invisible. Sitting underneath everything else. But it's there. And it's been there for a while. You can feel it in the way you talk to yourself when something goes wrong. Not the way you talk to someone you care about. Harder than that. More certain. You can feel it in the way you brace, even when something good is about to happen. Because some part of you already knows how this ends. You can feel it in the things you don't reach for. Not because someone told you not to. Because you already rejected yourself before anyone else had the chance. And you don't even notice you're doing it. It just feels like realistic thinking. Like you're being honest about your odds. Like you're protecting yourself from wasted effort. But protection built around a false belief becomes a cage that fits you so well. You forget it's a cage. You've tried harder, and it still wasn't enough. You've rested and felt guilty for it. You've read the books. You've had the conversations. You've made changes. Real ones. Some of them quietly significant, and some of them didn't hold. And you've watched yourself fall back into patterns you thought were behind you. More than once, maybe more times than you can count. And somewhere in all of that, without a single moment you could point to, the story solidified. Not as a fear, as a conclusion. This is just who I am. This is just how I work. This is just what happens when I try. Not dramatic, not a crisis, just a quiet conclusion that stopped being a conclusion and started being the air you breathe. And here's what that does to a person. It doesn't make you fall apart. It makes you keep going, but going in a way that costs more than it should. Every day slightly more exhausted. Every mistake feeling like more proof. Every good thing slightly easier to explain away. You've been living inside that belief for so long, you've stopped noticing it as a belief. It just feels like the truth, and you're not alone in this. Buddhism has understood this exact pattern for a very long time. What it says about where that belief comes from might change how you see yourself. That's what we're going to look at today. And you felt this, that certainty underneath everything, the one that doesn't announce itself. It just sits there, making you work harder to prove it wrong, making you explain yourself more than you need to, making you apologize for yourself before anyone has even asked you to. That belief is not passive, it's active. It's running in the background of every choice you make, every time you don't reach out when you want to, every time you downplay something that went well, every time you say, I got lucky, instead of, I did that. Every time you expect from yourself what you would never demand from someone you actually love. The belief is working, and it is working against you. Buddha said, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. Not after you've proven something. Not once you've fixed what's wrong. Right now, as you are, in this exact condition. Most of us hear that and let it slide right past because somewhere underneath, we don't actually believe we qualify. There's a list. Things to fix first. Standards to meet. Progress to show. And somewhere far down the road, after all of that, after you become a different version of yourself, then maybe. If this is landing for you, there's more of this on the channel. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Here's what Buddhism actually identifies as the root of that voice, the one that keeps generating the verdict, that something is fundamentally wrong with you. It has a name, Papañca, mental proliferation, the mind's tendency to take a single experience and spin an entire identity out of it. Something hard happens, something fails, and the mind doesn't stop at that was hard. It keeps going. That was hard, which means I'm not as strong as I thought. which means I probably never was, which means other people handle this better, which means the gap between me and everyone else has always been there, which means this is not a bad period. This is just who I am. One moment, one failure, one difficult stretch, and the mind turns it into a biography. And here's the thing about that process. It feels like honesty. It feels like you're done flinching, and you're finally seeing yourself clearly. Like all the times you hoped things would be different. We're just you not facing the facts. But it's not clarity. It's the mind doing what it always does. When it doesn't know how to hold something, it looks for a fixed point, something stable, something it can name and grip. And I am broken is, in a strange way, easier to hold than uncertainty. Because if you're broken, at least you know what you're working with. At least there's an explanation. At least you don't have to keep wondering why. The open question is harder to sit with than even a painful conclusion. Am I okay? Is this going to change? Do I have what it takes? Holding those questions with no answer is exhausting in its own way. And you know this feeling, the almost relief of reaching a verdict, even a brutal one, the way it feels more solid than not knowing. But Buddhism points to something underneath that conclusion, something that was present before the story started, and it's still there now, underneath everything you've layered on top of it. The Pali term is Buddhata, Buddha nature, the essential quality of awareness that is not damaged by experience, not diminished by failure, not worn down by the years of trying. This is not a poetic reassurance. It's a precise observation about the structure of mind. Think about it this way. A mirror can be completely covered in dust. You can't see its surface. You can't use it as a mirror. To look at it, you just see dust. But the mirror itself is still a mirror. Its capacity to reflect has not changed. The dust is not the mirror. The dust just accumulated on top of it. Buddhism is pointing to the same structure in you. The things that hurt you, the choices you made when you didn't know better, the years that felt like going backward, the patterns you haven't been able to break, the version of yourself you keep apologizing for, those are not you. They happen to you. They move through you. Some of them are still moving through you, but they are not the substance of what you are. Most people never learn to make that distinction. And so the dust becomes the whole story. And a whole life gets built around the belief that the mess is the person, that the accumulated weight of what went wrong is the same thing as what's underneath. But the awareness that has been watching all of this, the part of you that noticed things were hard, that tried different things, that kept looking for something better even when it didn't work, that awareness has been there the entire time, and it has never been broken. Something is shifting in how you understand this, because here's what that actually means practically. The version of yourself you've been trying to fix, the one that feels exhausted by its own patterns, the one that can't seem to build the momentum everyone else seems to have. That version is a state, not an identity. States change. Identities feel permanent, and that distinction matters more than almost anything. When the mind is in pain, it always tries to convert a state into an identity. That is the mistake Buddhism is asking you to see. Not a moral mistake, not a failure of character, just a predictable pattern that minds fall into when they don't know what else to do with suffering. You are not your worst period. You are not the decisions you made when you were overwhelmed and didn't have better options. You are not even the version of yourself that showed up on the days you handled things badly and knew it in real time and still couldn't seem to stop. You are not your patterns. You are not your history. You are not your worst interpretation of yourself. You are the awareness that is capable of watching all of that. The mirror that has been underneath the dust the entire time. And that awareness has never been broken. Buddha said, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. That line is easy to misread as advice about where to look. It's actually an observation about what you already are. Peace is not a reward you receive after you've fixed what's broken. It is the nature of the awareness underneath the noise. You don't have to find it. You have to stop covering it. But here's what nobody tells you about this. Understanding it and feeling it are not the same thing. You can hear everything just said and have it make complete sense intellectually and still wake up tomorrow morning and feel like something is wrong with you, because the belief is not just in your thoughts. It's deeper than thoughts. It's in your body, in the way your shoulders move when you make a mistake, in the way your chest tightens before you try something you care about, in the automatic scan you run before speaking in certain rooms, the one that checks whether what you're about to say is worth saying, whether you're the kind of person whose input lands, whether this is a moment that belongs to you. It's in the habits you built around protecting yourself from collecting more evidence, the way you stay quiet in certain rooms, the way you hold back on things you actually want, the way you manage expectations downward before anyone else has a chance to. That's not weakness. That's a very efficient protection system built around a belief that was never accurate in the first place. And dismantling it is not about trying harder. It is not about positive thinking. It is not about replacing the old story with a better story. That approach just adds more content to a mind that already has too much content. Buddha also said, the mind is everything. What you think, you become. Not in a motivational sense, in a precise, almost clinical sense. The belief that you are broken is being rehearsed every single day. Every time you dismiss a compliment with a reason why it doesn't count. Every time you explain away something you actually did well. Every time you treat your own rest as something you have to earn. Every time you hold yourself to a standard you would never apply to someone you actually care about. You are practicing the belief, and practice makes permanent. You didn't choose this. It's not weakness. That is just how minds work. What gets repeated gets reinforced. What gets reinforced starts to feel like fact. What feels like fact stops feeling like a choice. And the reversal of that is not positive thinking. The shift Buddhism is pointing toward is more fundamental than that. It's catching the moment the mind begins to proliferate. The moment that was hard starts becoming that's who I am, and staying there, right at that point. Not agreeing with the conclusion the mind is rushing toward. Not arguing with it either. Not telling yourself to think more positively. Just not handing it the pen. Letting the mind generate its story without treating the story as a fact report. This is a practice, not a one-time realization. Not a moment where you finally see it clearly, and then everything changes. A practice, which means you will forget. You will have days where the dust covers everything again, and you can't find the mirror. You will catch yourself mid-story, already 3 steps deep into the biography, before you even notice it started. That's fine. That is exactly what a practice looks like. The point is not to never fall into it. The point is to notice sooner each time, to catch yourself, and not make the catching into another thing to be ashamed of, because that's what the mind will try to do. It will turn the moment you notice the pattern into evidence of the pattern. You did it again. You always do this. See, you're exactly the kind of person who can't stop thinking this way. That is just Papañca running on a new subject. The same mechanism, different content. And the response is the same. You don't agree. You don't argue. You just don't hand it the pen. This is what meditation practice actually develops. Not relaxation. Not peace as an absence of difficulty. Not an empty mind. The capacity to watch the mind build its structures and not automatically move into them. To see the dust forming and not conclude that you are dust. And over time, you'll find that the stories lose their authority. Not because you defeated them, but because you stopped treating them as reporting. You stopped handing them authority that was never actually theirs. They are not reporting what's true. They are the mind doing what it always does when it doesn't know how else to respond. And you do not have to follow every conclusion your mind reaches. The dust will still come. Heavy thoughts will return. The feeling of falling short will surface again. Old patterns will reappear in situations you thought you'd moved past. There will be days that feel like no progress has been made at all. And there will be days when you can't even remember why you started looking. That is not failure. That is not evidence that the belief was right all along. That is not proof that the mirror was broken after all. That is what it looks like to be a human mind, working through conditioning that took years to build. The goal is not to never feel the weight of it again. The goal is to feel it and know it is not the final word. To feel the dust and remember you are the mirror. And here's what often doesn't get said about all of this. There is a version of this teaching that gets passed around as a kind of spiritual bypass. Someone is suffering, someone is struggling, and they get told, "You're perfect just as you are. The universe loves you. Nothing needs to change." That's not what any of this is saying. Some things genuinely do need to change. Some patterns are genuinely hurting you and the people around you. Some habits are genuinely worth examining and reshaping. The work is real, but there is a difference between doing the work from a place of not enoughness and doing the work from a place of clarity. When you work from not enoughness, every step forward is evidence you needed to take it. Every improvement is evidence you were lacking. The work never actually ends because the belief underneath it generates an infinite to-do list. When you work from clarity, the same actions feel different. Not because you've opted out of the difficulty, but because the difficulty is no longer proof of something. It's just difficulty, which is solvable, which is workable, which does not have to become a verdict. That is the shift Buddhism is pointing toward. Not away from the work, into a different relationship with it. The belief that you were broken was never a verdict. It felt like one. It carried the weight of one. It changed what you reached for and what you avoided and how you talked to yourself in the quiet. It has shaped more than you realize, but it was never actually a verdict. It was a conclusion a mind reached in a moment when it didn't have another option. It was the story that made the most sense with the information available at the time. And then you kept living inside it, long after the moment that generated it had passed, long after the circumstances changed, long after you changed, long after you had every reason to let it go. That's what happens. Not because you're weaker than other people, because that is what minds do. They find explanations. They hold on to them, because letting go means sitting with not knowing, and not knowing is harder than even a painful conclusion. But you have more options now. You can see what the mind is doing. You can see the moment a state starts to become an identity. You can see the moment you start mistaking the dust for the mirror itself. And seeing it is not the same as being free from it immediately, but it is the beginning of not being controlled by it. Here's what that can look like in an ordinary day. Something goes wrong. Not a catastrophe, just one of the ordinary failures that accumulate. You said the wrong thing. You forgot something important. You reacted in a way you didn't want to. You slipped into a pattern you thought you'd left behind. The old response is automatic and fast. Before you finished registering what happened, the mind has already started building. That means I'm not good enough. I always do this. I never get it right. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. And you've been living with that response for so long, it doesn't even feel like a response. It feels like observation, like you're just noting facts. But here's what you can do. Not instead of feeling it, alongside. You can notice the moment the state tries to become an identity. You can name it, not dramatically, not as a new project, just, that's Papañca. That's the mind doing what it does. That's dust, not mirror. You don't have to believe the story. You don't have to argue with it either. You just have to notice that you are the awareness watching it, not the story itself. That noticing doesn't fix the situation. It doesn't undo what happened, but it breaks the automatic pathway from something went wrong to I am wrong. And over time, those two things stop feeling like the same sentence. The self-compassion that Buddhism points toward is not about going easy on yourself. It's not about lowering standards. It's about recognizing that the voice telling you you're fundamentally broken is not an objective reporter. It's a voice produced by a mind doing its best with what it has. And you are not required to treat every thought your mind produces as a fact about your character. You were never broken. You were a complete awareness, moving through an incomplete understanding of yourself, moving through circumstances that were genuinely hard, moving through a mind that was doing what minds do, moving through patterns that had been in place long before you had any say in it. And through all of that, the mirror stayed intact. It was there on the days you couldn't explain what was wrong. It was there underneath every story you told yourself about what you were and what you weren't. It was there when you were most certain it wasn't. The mirror is still there now, not metaphorically, not as a hopeful story, as a description of what you actually are, underneath the accumulated weight of every hard thing that has ever moved through you. The capacity to be aware, the capacity to watch, the capacity to notice, that has not been damaged. And that understanding is already changing something. Not in a way you can measure today, but in a way that matters. This channel exists to help you see what's actually happening inside your mind through the lens of Buddhist wisdom. If that's what you're looking for, subscribe. There's more here waiting for you.